Our reading today is from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land, but when the Egyptians attempted to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had recovered the spies in peace. And what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Therefore, since we were surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the fear that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Christ, the pioneer and perfecter of this faith, who, for the sake of the joy that was set before him, endured the indignation of public execution, disregarded shame, and has taken a seat at the right hand of God.
I forgot what it was like to have to preach after the choir sang. Makes life a lot harder, although maybe you've softened everyone a little bit, so y'all did great. Congratulations. This is the second week of the series that Haley laid out for us in the Children's Moment, where we're going through the Trinity affirmation line by line, taking the time to examine ourselves, look at the past, look at where we are right now, and where we hope to go, based on the responsive affirmation that we speak together at the beginning of each of our services. Last week, we talked about the origins of this affirmation. We also talked about how thinking mythologically is maybe not just the way to approach our sacred texts, but also a way to approach ourselves. This week, we just heard Ben read from an epistle in the New Testament, a letter called Hebrews. And I've never actually used this text in a sermon, but I do love this sentiment. I did a little bit of digging. This letter was initially attributed to the Apostle Paul, but scholars have found that the Greek is better and the arguments are more polished than anything that we think Paul wrote. So it's in the style of Paul, but not his, probably. The most convincing argument that this isn't one of Paul's actual letters is that Paul was primarily concerned with the Gentiles and their adoption into the covenant between humanity and the God of Abraham. And this letter is pretty Jewish. It comes from the same collective memory and experiences to Jewish Christians. Of all the theories of who wrote this, my favorite guess that scholars have made is that Priscilla wrote it. I know, not the Queen of the Desert, but close. She was bonus points to everyone who got that. She was a contemporary of Paul's. She was mentioned in Acts and in Romans. In Romans 16:3, Paul says, "Give my greetings to Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in the ministry of Christ." I really like the argument that the most sound argument with the best grammar in the New Testament was written by a lady. I guess y'all do too. Good job. And I really like that argument in the context of what we're talking about today. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This is probably big news, breaking news to everyone in the space, but Christianity has kind of a bad reputation. It seems that the voices that have hijacked the figurative microphone to speak on behalf of all Christians really just want to make that bad reputation worse. So I, in addition to all the things I do, post semi-regularly on social media. I have a very modest following, but I did a silly trend video, and I got a lot of views and a lot of comments. And of course, it was one where I proclaimed that the good news is that you are loved for exactly who you are, and that being authentic to yourself is a way of glorifying your Creator. And that really annoyed people. So then I doubled down, because I'm me, and made another video using the sound, "The devil went down to Georgia." That video was about going toe-to-toe in the Greek with anybody who wanted to, because I'm stubborn as a mule and an educated jackass to boot. And those comments in that video were somehow worse. And while I usually don't read them, because believe it or not, I do have feelings and they do get hurt, one comment stuck out to me. A gentleman, term used loosely, commented, "Sure, he was ready to go toe-to-toe in the Greek, and what was I prepared to do when he won?" And I was struck, because how did winning become the goal of this work that I guess he also is called to? How did winning become the goal of the world? So I started doing some reflection about winning and losing, and I remembered being a kid steeped in fundamentalism with a phrase that Krista and I throw at each other pretty frequently. And we heard the phrase, "winning souls for the kingdom." So I guess on some level, it's always been about winning. It's particularly about winning if you're trying to fold your belief system to align with capitalism. But one thing that I have learned in nearly 10 years of this work is that Jesus does not hand out a set of steak knives to the pastor who does the most. Capitalism doesn't win here. But a group of us have been doing a book study around the Enneagram called The Road Back to You. And as we were discussing our various types, mine obviously came up, as all of ours do. And mine is described as competitive and agile. I don't share this because I'm super proud of it, but I share it because it's something that I have to know about myself when I consider winning. I have to know that I need to be mindful of these motivations behind my behaviors. But the good thing about this type is that I can entirely understand these ways in which I want Trinity to win. I want everyone who has ears to hear our Trinity affirmation. I want people to see that we are on the good side. We are not like those guys. No matter who you love, friends, you are welcome here. You can sit with us. And Trinity is not new to this thinking. We were the second reconciling church in Texas. Back in the early 90s, that was a really bold statement. That is prophetic thinking. And my enthusiasm for this work and for this community is vast. And I also have to keep in mind that just because this is where I am called, just because this is where my heart is, just because I am jazzed about something, doesn't mean that it's going to work, doesn't mean that it's the right thing, but it also doesn't mean that it's wrong. Because friends, even when I don't win, I learn. It doesn't mean that I have lost. I was thinking about this language in terms of the race set before us. In the reading, the Greek word that is translated as race is more broadly translated in other cases as agony. which is pretty accurate as far as races being run are concerned for me. But there is no doubt that Trinity endured the agony of the race through lots of pretty gross behavior codified by the denomination that so many people have loved. When the Trinity affirmation was adapted by this community in 2017, we were pretty new to the United Church of Christ. And also the United Methodist Church was doubling down on its harmful language and deliberate exclusion of the LGBTQIA community. I was Googling around, I was looking for the Time article, because we were in Time magazine in 1992, and I didn't find it, but I did find something else. I found a statement of dissent and non-compliance dated March 31st, 2019. It was written, at least signed, by Jimmy Allen Hall and the entire Leadership Council, and it provides a very similar level of Trinity history in a nutshell that reminded me a little bit of what I gave last week with my Abrahamic religions in a nutshell, but reversed. This statement is not about winning. It was written at a time of defeat. The statement is about doing what is right for all people. It is about putting faith into action individually and communally. It is about risking potential consequences in order to be able to live with oneself and one's professed values. As of last summer, it seems the United Methodist Church has kind of mostly gotten itself together in this regard. But there's still plenty of race to be run. Siblings, earlier I mentioned that I loved the argument that Hebrews was written by Priscilla. And I like that argument because I delight in irony. I delight that the best argument in a collection of books used as a weapon against women and leadership, against women's existence in these spaces, was being written by a woman. A delight in finding ways in which the arguments against my very person are not valid. I delight in these things not because I want to be right, but because all of us were created with worth and with value, and all of us deserve to have that message reinforced by God and by a community of people who love us. Siblings, I wish I could be like, yeah, all that's over. Great, we moved on. Everything is good now. But the race before us is no longer simply an issue of non-inclusion of a community by the United Methodist Church. Siblings, the race being prepared before us now is the erasure of human beings by a government that is threatening more than refusing us communion or allowing our ordination. Siblings, whatever disagreements we may have among ourselves, we can figure that out, especially if we don't lose sight of what is lurking in the world. Friends, we are the people we have to hold close right now, for we are working towards the same vision of justice and freedom for all people. I don't think I'm only speaking for myself when I say that things feel really, really hard right now. It is incredibly easy to be discouraged. My personal life has twice been touched by gun violence in the past 3 weeks. Friends, there are wars and rumors of war. And when we have to endure a 24-hour news cycle, when we have to endure very real threats being thrown at us and our siblings because of our gender identity, our orientation, our documentation status, our immigration, or a host of other pieces of our identity, which are mostly largely out of our control. And there are attempts to seize that control of us by clenching our guts with fear, We are told that we should be scared because of who we are, because of who we love, because of what we believe. But friends, Trinity stands strong, seeking to remind you of something else about yourself. You are welcome here because of who you are and because of who you love. You are another link in this very long chain of people who may not have been perceived as winners in any traditional sense. Mentioned in this text that Ben read were Rahab the sex worker, Gideon, who demanded proof that God was even talking to him, Samson, who was so love-drunk that he betrayed himself, and then his own gifts were what ended his life, Jephthah, who ran off at the mouth so hard it cost him his beloved daughter. These people are not in the Hall of Fame of nobility. Even when we read them mythologically, we don't see where they were superhuman in any regard other than they persevered through time and through space, holding on to what they believed, standing up for what was right. And even though none of those people mentioned saw victory in their lifetime, they passed along their enthusiasm and their witness through the generations all the way down to us. Because siblings, in the same way they were, we are here. Regardless of how ill-equipped or afraid we might feel, we were made for such a time as this, surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Those names that are on the stained glass in our classroom, those whose names are in our Google Drive on Leadership Council minutes, in bylaws inscribed in our hearts and our history. Siblings, this is not a race that will probably have a concrete finish line crossing with victory or with defeat. This is a race that we will endure to pass the baton to the next generation. Because friends, Trinity deserves to exist. It deserves to exist now as much as it ever has, and it deserves to exist on those same terms, but with a deeper understanding of our mission than perhaps we've ever had. Friends, we are surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses who are cheering us on, and we build on the foundation of their witness so that we can lay aside every weight and the fear that clings so closely. Because friends, no matter who you are welcome here. And maybe even more importantly, no matter who you love, you are loved here. And thanks be to God for that. Amen.